Friends, good morning.
Good morning.
I had originally thought to call this sermon, I'd originally had it titled Religion and Regret, but that sounded so depressing, so I changed the title to something more uplifting. Like that. So, let me pray for myself. Emptiness here, emptiness there, but the infinite universe stands always before your eyes. Remember, and remember to forget. Amen. Those were words from the third patriarch of Zen, from the Shinshin Ming, the Mind Faith inscription, a Chan Buddhist poem that teaches everything. It was a gift recently given to me by a new friend this past week. Avoiding attachment and then avoiding the avoidance of attachment. This is religion that has a worship. The Shinshin Ming is a poem, and it's also a liturgy, and it's also spending time with this liturgy, and it's practicing the Tao. Remember, we don't practice Zen while we peel the potatoes. Yeah. Zen is peeling the damn potatoes. That's Zen. Some Quaker worship services, if you've ever been to one, they are nothing more and nothing less than an hour spent in silence together. And the Spirit fills that space with wisdom. And some Quaker services are nothing more and nothing less than an hour spent chatting with one another about the common moments of the everyday. And Spirit fills that space with wisdom. I was taught in seminary to give as much attention to the worship order as we give to the sermon. And if I did that, I wouldn't have time to do anything else. So I outsource a lot of the work of this time we spend together to Noah and Emmanuel and Cassie. And I outsource a lot of the work to Christopher and Fred and Nuria and Bruce and Don and David and Duncan. That's all here. Our worship services today, as we have them, they follow an order and a structure that's a combination of orders for worship taken from 1955, 1975, 1990, and 2005. That's what this is. I chose those time periods for a reason while we're doing this together. I work with the paint on the palette. I was taught in Chicago that there are two primary dimensions to human worship, the act of worship done by humans. This is true for all corporate human practices, from the Quakers to the Buddhists, the Mormons to the Mennonites, 12-step groups to yoga classes, from Thanksgiving dinners and drum circles, all of it. Almost all forms of worship can be broken down into two primary dimensions. And I'm going to call them the vertical dimension and then the horizontal dimension of worship. People tend to fall into one or the other category. People also switch between them from vertical to horizontal and back again based on the circumstances of their life or their age, a host of other factors. And some people are bi-directional. All right, listen to these descriptions to see if whether you feel more connected or comfortable with one or the other, vertical or horizontal. The vertically oriented worshiper is up-down kind of thing. Worship is how they connect to something transcendent. Worship should contain for them mystery and mystical experiences and deep and nourishing silence, contemplation. The presence of other people can be distracting, let's say. They might not mean to be, right? But for the vertically oriented participant, oftentimes they need focus. These are folks that get distracted or frustrated by a lot of applause or clapping in worship, a lot of participation. Please don't clap. This isn't a concert, they might say. Now, children are miracles, okay, but they can be quiet miracles. Yeah? Maybe they'll have their own worship experience that works to connect them more deeply to something transcendent, perhaps somewhere else in the building. Yeah. Okay. Now for the horizontally oriented worship person, this time together is how they connect with the incarnational presence of the divine. Holiness is seen and known in the faces and presence of fellow humans. Worship should be joyous, raucous even. They might clap and shout, show joy, the victory of the day. Talking to others and sharing testimonies and embracing and improvisation. All of these things are outward signs of inner joy. And children should be seen and heard, and listened to, and put the child in the pulpit, for God's sake. What are you doing? Children lead the way. Does one of these describe you? I vacillate, but given a choice, I tend to seek out the vertical. If I'm on my own and I'm in town, I would look for Taizé services. I like chanting in quiet, in darkness, in silence. Well, most of my dearest friends seek out dancing religions and drumming and collaborative music and clapping. Dear God, are they eating food in the sanctuary? What on earth? Both styles are good. Both are important. Both are necessary and appropriate. And we strive to welcome both in Fountain Street Church. It's very hard to do. Most churches will pick one or the other. Well, I'm not here. Worship is a directional thing. It's an orientation. And worship is revelatory because it can help reveal our religion and the religion of the people around us, all right? Worship is a doorway to religious practice. Where we focus our worship, we will ultimately focus our devotion. What do you think motivates a person to attend a political rally? Or listen to right-wing talk radio for hours in a day? Huh? Oh. Today we just heard from the epistle of James again. James the just. James, this is recorded in the New Testament, the Bible. We've been working our way through the Psalms. We've been at 3 different points so far. This is the 3rd time. I've diverted us from the Psalms and jumped forward about 800 years to the book of James. And it's usually when it's time for me to talk about religion. This is intentional and it's contextual. The book of James was written directly to a non-denominational, interreligious church. If the epistles of the Bible are to be any use to us here at Fountain Street, they've got to be held together in their own context, and then they have to speak to our context. And James was written to a group of people who were not only interreligious, bringing different traditions into the church, high church, low church, Jewish and Christian, and many things in between. It was people who had different names for God and the divine, but also people who had no traditions at all. And together they were trying to create something new and hold together. They were trying to share some impossible thing that they'd found with the people in their community as well. And so James is written as an epistle to the Fountain Street Church of the late 1st century. James can't make the same appeals to doctrine or dogma that maybe Paul or Peter can make in their epistles. So you see him developing and deploying these heuristics. Heuristics is a simple technique to kind of quickly develop an understanding of the circumstances. Today, James is talking about a worthy religion and worthless religion. Now, let me hammer home the point that James isn't working from a set of established dogmatic principles. So first he says, okay, you've got these 2 broad categories of people who are making some claim on our movement and on the universe in general. And some of them are hearers of the word and some of them are doers of the word. There's some Zen in this. He writes, quote, "If any are hearers of the word and not doers, they're like a person who looks at their face in a mirror and they recognize themselves, but upon departing, they immediately forget what they were like. But those who look deeply into the perfect law, which is the law of liberation, and who persevere, not being simply hearers who forget, but rather doers who act, they will then be blessed in their doing." End quote. There's a tension that exists in the interreligious movement and in the Unitarian Universalist movement and in the other non-dogmatic and non-creedal churches, and I think it's valid to talk about this. This is something that Duncan Littlefair and David Rankin talked about a lot, argued about on occasion. It's something that Sue Cinnamon and Bruce Bodie also, and Don Hoekstra, got into, I think, perhaps to a lesser extent. If we're building a movement together that's going to be open-handed and non-dogmatic, while at the same time we're making space for some claims about the nature of this thing and how it hangs together, we've got to make room at the table for people to hold fast to some truths about reality that we may not ourselves agree with. In other words, it's one thing to say, as we say, that there are no religious tests for this membership at Fountain Street Church. Deeds over creeds, right? I think I read that on your website. But then it's entirely another thing to say, you must strip your soul naked of any transcendental beliefs before you get a seat at the table. That you have to leave these truth claims about reality outside the doors and hold fast perhaps to nothing. That's a purity test. That's a purity test. The tension is, are we going to be a place that sees everything and says nothing? So the charge that gets leveled against a lot of the denominations that I work with is that there are people who observe every religion in the world and practice none of them, who studiously avoid practicing religion. In fact, Duncan Littlefair got pretty heated up about this sort of stuff. We just started a new archive channel on the church YouTube page, and I'll post these words in the coming days. But he said, your religion is the most important matter before you, and you've got to get clear about it. Dorothy Judd talked about this as well, and I just preached about that 2 weeks ago. But James the Just, writing this letter that we heard, he's talking about this. And James gives us a test to figure out whether people are serious about the stuff that they say. He gives us a test that we can apply, and it's not a purity test. It's not a test for participation. It's rather a heuristic for determination. But he says that some people and some religions are worthy and some are worthless. Quote, anyone who has a religion that deceives their hearts has a religion that's worthless. And then he says, religion that is pure and undefiled is this, to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself spotless from the world. This is prophecy. The prophets, we've been talking about them as well. They connect this bad religion to idolatry. They connect it to social injustice. Thank you, Rod Tucker, if you're out there. Social justice, it isn't the object of our worship, but it is a test. I'm going to say this again because it's important. And this is a lot of the things that I think Littlefair was trying to get at to resolve the tension in non-creedal churches. Social justice can be then the yardstick by which you measure the quality of a religious practice. Now, James says simply, care for widows and orphans. But listen to the prophecies that he's working with and see if it speaks at all to our modern context. We'll start with Isaiah. Quote, your rulers are rebels and partners with thieves. They love bribes, and they chase after gifts. They do not defend the cause of the fatherless. The widow's case does not come before them. And woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, who deprive the poor of their rights, and who withhold justice from the oppressed. That's Isaiah. Amos says, you levy a straw tax on the poor, and you impose taxes on their grain. And though there are those who oppress the innocent and take bribes and deprive the poor of justice. And Prophet Micah says, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This is not just about our personal ethics or the way we ought to organize our nation either. This is about religious practice. This is the nonsense I get all the time out there from people who say things like, well, politics has to be kept out of the church. Politics is separate. It doesn't belong in the pulpit. As if politics is this magical box that we can put things in to separate these things from our faith. Maybe, God's like Superman and God's got X-ray vision, but so we got to put our politics in like a lead-lined box that God can't see into, I had somebody this week try to tell me that politics is left-brain stuff and religion's right-brain stuff. Oh, so one side's creative and artistic and the other's logical and mathematical. It's garbage. It's garbage. They can't... One will rule the other. One will rule the other. One will always dominate and take over the other. Jesus talks about this in Matthew 6. No one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. So, as Jesus says, quote, you cannot serve both God and money. You can make politics your religion, or you can allow your religion to inform your politics, but you can't have it both ways. The prophets make this connection very clear as well. Isaiah says, stop bringing meaningless offerings, but rather seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the orphan, and plead the case of the widow. And Jeremiah says, will you steal and murder and commit perjury and then come and stand before me in this house which bears my name and say, we are safe? Do not trust in deceptive words that say, this is the temple of the Lord. If you oppress the foreigner, the orphan, or the widow, I will not let you live in this place. We have in this world religion that is worthwhile, I think, and religion that is worthless. And the yardstick we use to measure the difference, according to James, is whether or not it inspires social justice. Whether or not your practices and disciplines are fuel for the practice of justice. And that is love. That is love. It's not simply love of God or love of people in your church or love of those who love us in return, but it is love for the outcast, the stranger, the poor, the sick, the weary. And Jesus takes it one step further and says it includes love for our enemies and those who hate, oppress, and destroy us. And that's Jesus movement stuff. I'm not going to put that on you, but David Rankin wrote, the sum of all theology is love. I chose his poem specifically for the first reading today. I can't call David up on the phone and ask him what he means. That opportunity has now passed. But the last line of the words that he gave us, to be human is to be in a state of process, to live, to love, and to never die. To never die. How is it to die? To die before you're dead, as Yevgeny Yevtushenko has it? But to cease growing, to cease wondering, to cease working, pursuing, practicing. This isn't pie in the sky when you die things. This is never die. Never stop living, never stop growing, stretching, pursuing, and being pursued, stretching toward new light, letting the light fall upon you. This is to worship and practice. Worship is time invested in religious devotion. The surveys say that on average around 10% of Americans set aside time each week for intentional worship. I think the other 90% do so unintentionally. And worship has dimensions, it has directionality, it points like an arrow towards something else. Or in the words of James, it is staring into a mirror and worshiping what you see there and then forgetting. We will grow because we will be a place that asks people to practice something. And we have work to do to break that word, religion, out of its concrete and to let it grow. If you think this means that you've got to believe in some mythical deity somewhere or something like that, some pantheon of them, God help you. If you think you've got to speak the right magical words about Jesus or something, you need to believe in some superstition in order to do this stuff. You've missed it. You've missed it. Every single religion in the world is an atheist to some other religion. The only difference is the name or number of the deities they believe in. The measure of a religion is whether or not it helps, heals, uplifts, liberates, and then hopes for these things. A religion that says our freedom is utterly bound up in the condition of every other human being on this planet, and then this planet itself. And the measure of a worthy religion is the power and authority it gives a person to throw their bodies on the gears of history. Rooted like a tree, stand before the power of empire and bigotry and hatred and destruction, and holding forth the righteous hand of God, say, stop, no more. So be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. There's a lot of worthless religion going around. And a lot of it will kill you dead years before you die. But let some worthy practice give you life in abundance, that you have what you need to set about to the work of liberation, even if you must needs be start with yourself. You have everything that you need for this fight. You've got it. And together, that's how we save the world. Amen.
Amen.